This move doesn't exactly come out of nowhere. Last month, when President Donald Trump endorsed former Pinal County Sheriff Mark Lamb, he sent Feely a message: run in a different district. So rather than take on Lamb in the East Valley, he's heading north into a district Republicans see as a must-win. Here's part of the statement Feely released today. After nearly a quarter century in professional football, I know that no player is more important than the well-being of the team. In this moment, the best way I can serve our GOP team is to defend this crucial Republican seat. Feely adds more political drama into the 1st Congressional District that opened up when Congressman David Schweikert announced he was running for governor. Feely joins businessman John Troborough, state lawmaker Joseph Chaplik, and current leader of the Arizona Republican Party, Gina Swoboda, in the GOP primary. Swoboda has already secured the Trump endorsement, but given that Feely is taking the president's advice, political experts think this could set up another situation where Trump endorses two candidates in the same race.
It certainly confuses the voters a tad bit there, so we'll see how that primary rolls around. But I would caution everybody, the reason that it's really important is this district that he just moved into is a highly competitive district, and Democrats really have been challenging the last couple election cycles to try and get a win in that district. So Republicans are going to need the wins at their back going into the midterm elections in that district to keep the Democrats from winning a seat.
In Arizona's Republican primary for governor, Trump has endorsed Congressman Andy Biggs and businesswoman Karen Taylor Robeson. The winner of the 1st Congressional District GOP primary will face the winner of the even more packed Democratic Party in the general election. The district is one of two swing districts in Arizona that could determine which party controls the House in 2026. In the newsroom, Dennis Welch, Arizona's Family.